TFA fam, what is going on? Got a full house here for you all tonight. Going to run through a Superflex Dynasty startup mock draft. I know there's a little bit of a lull. Everyone gets into the startups at the beginning of the offseason. Now we're waiting on the training camp to start. We're all going to start to get bored here. It's a time where a lot of us are going to take on too many leagues that we shouldn't be in, but that's the beauty of it. So here we are. We're going to try and get through, we are going to get through 12 rounds. We have a 30-second clock. Just want to shout out to the TFA crew who are joining us. Kev will be coming on here screen as well, even though, apparently he hates Dynasty, but he can't stay away from the talk. So I think he is a closet fan. I'm going to say that while he is not on screen, so he can't hijack this and take over. And then just a shout out to everyone who jumped in with us. Chad jumped in, Walito, of course, Ashton, Jay Stern, and am I forgetting
Dwight.
We got Dwight. Oh my God, DJ Devi D. Look at this. Look at this guy. Just get it all done. Love it. So hey, let's Robbie, go ahead, throw this up. Like I said, we were doing a PPR Superflex
Dynasty.
Man, this is
startup, baby. I'm gonna hit start, but Kev, I believe Cody, I believe you're pulling it up for our viewers here. But I'm gonna get it rolling.
Good call. My God, I think this might be my first stream ever.
No, don't you worry. We're gonna. It's not too surprising. I'm gonna start right now, and I'm gonna put myself here on the clock. If anybody had some anticipation of who I was going to select, it was a pretty tough call. But with this being a 12-team Superflex Dynasty startup, I will take Patrick Mahomes with the first pick, and we will get this thing rolling. It's also PPR. Cody, what else do we have that's fancy? We're only doing 12 rounds just to make sure that we keep it short for everybody, but we go deep enough where you guys can see not only how we build our starting lineup, but who are those bench targets that we're trying to get that we think can produce here over the next 2 to 3 plus years.
Yeah, nothing else fancy. Not doing two tight end or anything like that, but 12 rounds kind of gives us a good enough look. And then once we finish up here, we will go into some, just a general discussion on, next guys up for us, who we are liking after that and that sort of thing. But normally you're going to have 9 to 10 starters on for your Superflex league. So gives us a couple bench players. And then, like I said, after that, we'll just kind of open up the discussion and start talking about some of the guys who, maybe didn't go yet, who we were thinking about, and that sort of thing. So look at this. CJ, did you just time out?
Oh, not a good start. Not a good start, CJ. I thought he was waiting for you to finish and tell you guys who he was going to pick here. We got Walito. All right, Christian is rolling here. Christian, who are you looking at?
Oh, this is easy for me. I'm going Dak right here. No question. 6,000 yards coming up.
I feel like there's a little bit of a drop-off after you have, obviously, Mahomes in his own tier, but then I have Kyler, Dak, and Josh Allen all right there in my kind of QB tier 2 for Dynasty. Lamar Jackson, I'm just on the fringe there, but yeah, I think that was a good final pick for that tier.
Yeah, Dak's not getting enough love with that upper tier. People quickly forget what last year was starting to look like.
Yeah, the crazy thing is a lot of people had him ranked in that upper tier too. You know what I mean? So like he was ranked in the upper tier, played really well, and then for whatever reason he's getting knocked out.
And that defense is still going to be bad, so they're going to have to throw it a ton.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely. Don't have to remind me.
Do you guys think just in general are quarterbacks being overvalued slightly in dynasty startups? Like I feel like there's the past year or two, they've really started to go hot and heavy, in the the first first 2 rounds, where before they kind of be like sprinkled in? Do you think they're like it was an overcorrection to the other side, or do you think this is kind of how it quote unquote should be in your super flex drafts?
Not for me. I mean, I think quarterback is your longest shelf life, right, for a player. And if we have these players who are, I think, elite, and you know that they're established, they have their contracts set. I think those are the players that you can trust on your dynasty roster. If you're not Christian and trading 10 trades every day and they're moving off your team like it's redraft, you can have them, right, for 5-10 years. And so I think the quarterback is still king for me. But eventually you'll see some of those top running backs start to trickle in. I think we had a couple of autos, but if we didn't have autos, I think those running backs still trickle in towards the end of this first round either way.
Yeah, I'm with Robbie. There's no such thing as going quarterback too early or too often in a Superflex dynasty. If you've never been in a situation where you've had a quarterback injury or two and you've had to, really hope that you're getting Nick Mullins off the waiver wire, once you experience that, you'll never be quarterbackless again. So, for me, you guys are going to see me pound quarterback twice here to start the draft, and I just feel pretty comfy going the rest of the way after that.
I'm not even playing one quarterback leagues anymore because I'm just so used to this Superflex format now. It almost seems like it's a standard.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Brandon, you kind of went back to back there with Wilson and Burrow. I kind of like that start. With on the turn, it'll be interesting to see what comes back to you for those running backs and wide receivers. But, Cody, I wanted to ask you, because you went Justin Jefferson. We see the first wide receiver and the only wide receiver to go. Is he obviously your wide receiver one in Dynasty over Tyreek, over Devontae, over A.J. Brown and some of these other guys?
Probably should have taken Tyreek, to be honest, but this 30-second clock is getting all jittered up. Like I took Barkley there, and it's all right. We'll rebound here. Tyreek should have been the pick, but I think it is close between Tyreek and Jefferson for me. With Adams, I mean, he is getting closer to that age apex. I would not feel comfortable taking him as wide receiver one right now in a startup. I still think he should be valued at in a top tier, but especially with Aaron Rodgers being out of the picture, like that connection with him and Rodgers, I think is just something that is being a little bit overlooked in startups and ADP right now. So I would not feel comfortable taking Adams. I do think Tyreek, if I could rewind this 5 seconds ago, probably should have snagged Tyreek instead, but I'm also completely fine with Jefferson.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting grab. And then I really like Ashton's start here. He gets Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence, two super young quarterbacks to kind of build his team around. So I think that's a fantastic start. And then Christian, you're going with Dak and then Trey Lance. So I like the upside potential there. I definitely am seeing these teams that are starting two quarterback. Obviously, we're just getting rolling here, but it'll be interesting to see how some of these teams turn out that didn't go quarterback to start.
And God forbid somebody in the league likes to trade pretty actively and may hoard the QBs a little bit.
You would never.
Christian, are you one of those guys that just you're going to take 5 quarterbacks and force everybody to trade with you?
I'm a taking the best value on the board guy usually, but I'm always the most active trader in any league I'm in. I'll probably make close to 20 trades a year in each league I'm in, so I am certainly willing to flip my roster if the value's there.
What you doing here, Jobby?
All right, so I locked in Swift because I really like him as a young running back to build an RB1 starter with at the running back position. And then I'm looking at quarterback here. And if I don't grab a quarterback now, I'm going to be hurting, I feel like. But I'm not going to reach for a quarterback because I feel like there's a lot of guys that I like there. So I'm going to go with my man, my wide receiver. Was he 2 or 3 for me? 2 in Dynasty. I get DK Metcalf there to start the 3rd round.
Can we all just make a petition to get rid of Mike Zimmer and Pete Carroll? Like, is that something that we can pull off as a community? Can we? I know we all have our disagreements. I know Twitter is just full of fighting in the streets, but can we band together for that one beautiful thing and just get rid of two of the worst when it comes to like ruining fantasy potential? Can we please get behind that?
Are they the only two? I feel like there's a lot more coaches that we need to get rid of.
Those would be the absolute top two on my list. Like if you gave me a magic wand and said you can get rid of two, like no questions asked, like no hesitancy, right away.
Yeah, I think it's he's definitely right. There's definitely a couple more coaches that I'd love to see unleash their star potential a little bit more. Like another one is I don't get why Aaron Jones never gets the full workload that he has.
That's a good one.
That's a name that he's been running back 2 and running back 5. And guys, we've seen him consistently in Dynasty stay outside the top 12. I think he just sneaks inside my top 12. But even after this contract, even after the last 2 seasons he's had, I still can't even get him inside of my top. I do have him at 9. So most people I feel like still have him outside of running back 1. And only just imagine if he got that full workload this season with maybe A.J. Dillon mixing in there with goal line carries. That'd be really exciting, I think.
Yeah, I think for him, it's always been like every season it's going to be a touchdown regression, and the dude just keeps performing.
So Ashton, yeah, he says he doesn't normally go 2 QBs, but man, I think that's a solid foundation to start with. I'm interested who he picks here. Probably going to go towards obviously running back or wide receiver. Have we had a?
You jagaloon.
You know what's interesting is how far these tight ends are falling. I haven't done a startup in a while, so I don't know if this is normal, but I would venture to guess that normally a tight end. And when we didn't list if it was tight end premium, it wasn't an option for me to select, but I feel like there's normally a tight end around this time. Let's see what Brandon does here on the turn. So with Brandon and I having the turns, it's really tough because you want to make sure if you have to reach for a guy, you just have to do it right because you're not going to get a pick for another 23 picks. And that's the tough part about picking at the turn. But obviously the good side is you kind of get those back-to-back picks where you can focus on a specific position if you want and still know that you're going to get that next guy right behind him. So
I really wanted CEH or CEH to fall to me. So now they didn't, and there's I'm a little worried about Aaron Jones, the longevity of how long he would be running in Green Bay. So I'm actually going to take Eckler here because he's going to get so many catches out of the backfield.
Yep, absolutely.
There's your first tight end, Robbie.
I know I need and should take a quarterback. Like at this point, I feel like if you don't get one in the first 2 rounds, like there's just a bunch of question marks, especially for dynasty purposes. Can't do
it. Loading up on that youth. I was recently in an auction with Cody, and we had some Devi in there. And Cody, you went full punt, man. You didn't take anybody, I think, over the age of, what was it, 22, maybe?
14, I think. Yeah.
So Cody definitely favors the youth in these dynasty startups.
I think too if you're doing like an actual draft, one of the things I would highly suggest paying attention to is doing that. It's paying attention to the other teams. Like any of the teams going like super youth upside heavy, then I think that presents a chance to get some value on some of the quote unquote veterans who might be hitting like I was talking about Devontae Adams with that age apex coming up that people might be scared off of taking somebody like that, and Allen Robinson and, those guys who are just year in, year out, just not valued to the point that they should be, and kind of make that run for the ship in year 1 and then see if you can just get a free ride, the next year or 2, depending on your league fees and the payouts and all that stuff. But that is absolutely something that I would be paying attention to in your startups, whether it's Superflex, just 1 QB, Devi, whatever it is. Pay attention to the other teams in your draft and kind of see if you can figure out like, all right, are they building around wide receiver? Are they going, youth heavy? Do they not care about age? And just kind of keep that in mind and see if that presents an opportunity for you to make a run. Because at the end of the day, as much as we like building up, these sexy teams and having all the rookies and all the devies and, look how young my team is and what if this guy hits? At the end of the day, we are actually trying to win. And that is the entire point of every single fantasy format. So that is one of the things that I would highly recommend paying attention to, is just the other teams and how their builds are looking.
I'd ask the chat, do you guys have a feeling on Watson in Dynasty? Like, obviously for redraft, we're kind of scared off of him, but what about for Dynasty? Because I feel like here he's a quarterback that I'm targeting that I see above Rodgers, Tua, Zach Wilson, Tannehill, and then Stafford just went right before my pick.
I thought about taking Watson instead of Chase. But that's just...
It's difficult because he's going to be at least suspended 8 games for this year. And I know dynasty-wise, still Nico Collins is there, but I mean, they don't have the greatest depth on that team.
I don't necessarily think – I think he's out of Houston. I think he serves his 8-game suspension elsewhere. Whatever that suspension is, I think it's a possibility he misses the entire year potentially, whether he is forced to sit out or whatever ends up happening. I'm not worried about Houston. I'm just worried about where he ends up playing and how many games he misses. And to take him as my QB1 at that point was something I couldn't do. If I would have snagged, I was hoping Burrow was going to come back to me in the second, but Brandon obviously doubled up on Wilson and Burrow with the turn there. If I could have snagged Burrow in the second, that would have made me think a lot more about taking Watson in the fourth. But as a QB1, that was just something I couldn't do there.
Yeah, I think with Watson, nothing will happen with the trade until they give him the suspension or whatever. So it's kind of just a holding pattern until that happens. And then I'd say someone would reach out. I'm hoping Denver might reach out because they need a quarterback that can utilize all those weapons out there.
Yeah, anywhere he goes outside of Houston, his value will skyrocket. So something I've had to do with my fourth pick, Michael Thomas. I still think he's a top 10 quarterback or wide receiver. For me, he's my number 6 wide receiver. And I know he had the year last year, but if Jameis Winston is a starter there, throwing 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, I really think that Michael Thomas goes back to his old form. Nobody's talking about him.
So I got to jump in here real quick. Walito has been just tossing out 5s like he's at the club here. And Cody, I feel like we shouldn't have brought it up because his last message says, I don't know if you can see it or not.
I cannot. I'm staring at the draft board.
I figured that's why. So he says, Cody isn't thanking me for my money. So here's another $5. So Walito, I will note your contributions. Thank you as always. But Cody hasn't thanked you yet. So if you want to just continue to do so, knock your socks off. But we definitely thank you for that.
Well, Lito, that is one I want you to know, buddy, I would absolutely thank you if I saw that. You can blame Robbie for not bringing that up. That's 100% his fault.
You can really blame the 30-second timer. That thing is a lot faster than it seems.
I feel like it's kind of good though, because I'm looking at these guys and I don't have time to check any rankings. I don't have time to parse through my full. I basically look at the names and I'm making a semi-gut decision, and then what I'm going to do is look back at my rankings and see, okay, do I actually like this player over that player and adjust a little bit. So I kind of like this exercise.
Pop quiz hot shot.
All right, Cody, who are you going here? Cody has Tannehill as his only quarterback. He's got Barkley and Mixon, so a good stable there. And then Jefferson and Chase, which is a fantastic young core wide receiver. Feel like
my God, that was
no.
Where's Tom?
Brandon's not a fan. Brandon, what are your thoughts on?
I'm not a fan either. I looked up. There was 4 seconds left. I didn't have time to switch over to another tab. Trying to go through.
I mean, I think Wentz will bounce back. They're in Indy, with Reich and everything. But I'm not even a Tua fan. I would take in Tua over Wentz there.
And then the whole M. Jones thing through. I was who the hell is M. Jones? What quarterback is M. Jones? Like, that threw me off. Not having a good day. And then I was looking up and I saw Miles Sanders was still available in the 6th round, and I was like, that caused me to have a mini stroke. And I was looking around, like the wide receiver room still stacked. Then I flipped back over and I saw M. Jones. Said, why the hell is Marvin Jones why is he a quarterback? The whole thing is the whole thing's just throwing me off.
Christian, I think it's interesting, your strategy, because you got such good value with Darren Waller there, but going back to back tight ends there is fairly interesting.
Yeah, I didn't intend to do that. I thought there was no way Waller got past you with the turn. Seeing DJ Moore come through there instead of Waller, with how much you love Waller, was quite surprising to me. And then there was no way I thought he'd make it another half round back to me. So, I mean, to me, the value is just too much to pass up there, even though I wouldn't traditionally go for 2 top shelf tight ends.
Oh, man. So I was hoping that between Waller, Hawkinson, Andrews, and Fant, one of them would make it back to me. And Chad takes Fant, the last of that tier for me, right before me. So I'm going to adjust on the fly here, try and see what I can do. Oh, man, this is where the draft gets interesting. Very interesting. You know what you got to do?
Sure.
Just go with the comfort. Add a little Trey Sermon.
I would rather take Carson Wentz in the 2nd round than Trey Sermon in the 6th. Is there any, as Robbie goes to make this second pick of the turn, obviously something to note for those who are following along, having 2 guys on auto draft who were supposed to be veterans in the fantasy space. I mean, it's going to throw it off, especially in a super flex, with Dwight having Cook, Chubb, Dobbins, Kittle, Monty, and Allen, which in and of its own is probably one of the best auto drafted teams I've seen. But obviously in a super flex, I feel confident that Dwight would have taken a quarterback by this point. And then, the dynasty hater just coming in and just trying to completely ruin this draft for us with Kevin auto drafting. Kevin, I am not surprised about. Dwight, I am surprised. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah, obviously I think you see the quarterback sneak up a little bit. And if we had more time, I also think the tight ends go a little bit differently than they have. I agree with Christian that Waller making it there to the 5-6 is quite the value. And then I'm a Hawkinson fan. Him going to the 5-8 is also a pretty good value. So a little bit different of a draft, but then again, we just want to give a semi good look at what these dynasty startups are doing here after the draft. And kind of referencing back to your mention on Trey Sermon is I think he is the workhorse back there by next season, by the end of this first season in 2021. So he's a guy that I think shoots up draft boards here once Mostert leaves town next year, and I think he takes the full workload there.
Christian, I'm going to let you pick, and then I do have a question. So one of the tried and true methods, or I guess something that we kind of just always talk about in startups, is building around the wide receiver position. And you just took your first. Obviously, you talked about not being able to pass up on the value of Waller in the 5th there, but you just took your first wide receiver, maybe even your 3rd tight end with Chase Claypool, with how he's going to be deployed in Pittsburgh with 5-yard Ben Roethlisberger in the fold. But
this is a dynasty league, Cody. Ben Roethlisberger's not much longer from the league, in my opinion.
And that's almost scarier to me. But anyway, do you typically try to build around wide receiver whenever you're doing your dynasty startups, or it's kind of just how the board falls to you? Is this like a draft that isn't like typically representative of how you typically draft? What are your thoughts on your start here so far?
Well, what's typical from the way I usually draft is not waiting on QB. I'm always going to get two QBs early. That's not a position I want to have concerns at. I never come into a draft with a set strategy or a set player I'm shooting for. I let the value come to me and I adjust along the way. In this case, the 2 tight end build, I was thrilled to get Pitts where I did, and then Waller's there a whole round later. So that, to me, that was just too good to say no to. And I love the wide receivers that are still on the board. I think that's where the value is, especially in Dynasty. In redraft, you can say, okay, there's only so many top 24 guys. In Dynasty, I mean, look at the board that's left now. I mean, Jalen Waddle's here. He was just going in the first round of rookie drafts. Robert Woods is here. It's like the guy finishes, around wide receiver 12 every single year. You still got DJ Chark, Julio Jones, Cooper Kupp, Juju, Rashad Bateman. I mean, there's still a ton of young talent at wide receiver where I'm going to be fine. I may not have the best wide receiver room in the league, but I've got a top 3 quarterback room in the league. I've got a top 5, maybe running back for this year, and I certainly have the best tight ends in the league. So I have positional advantages where no one else in this league has positional advantages. And I'm going to like my wide receiver core that's all going to be aged, 21 to 25, and I'm going to get plenty of them in these mid rounds of the draft. So I'll take my positional advantages at quarterback and at tight end. I've got my great anchor running back with Zeke. I've even got a good third QB. My third QB is better than, half the second QBs in the league. So I feel my positional advantages right now are much heavier than a lot of others. And I'm very happy with the wide receivers I'm going to collect these next few rounds.
It's going to be interesting, though, filling out that running back room, I think, because obviously you grabbed extra talent with your tight ends and you grabbed a third quarterback. I think you were the first one to grab a third quarterback, if I'm not mistaken. I think there's only one other team that has a third quarterback right now, Chad, and he just took his. And so I think you're going to see the drop-off come here, and you're going to obviously try and shoot for these upside young backs, but you're going to have to nail on a couple of these strong running backs here in the next couple rounds, or else I feel like that's where that disadvantage, right? You have the advantage at one side, but then the disadvantage at running back for sure.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, running back's a position that can turn at any moment. I mean, last year, if you had McCaffrey and Barkley, you probably finished last in your league. So it's just a higher probability of injury at that position. It's a shorter shelf life at that position. So that's another thing, I guess, Cody, that's characteristic of me. I'm not going to have 5 guys that I like long term at running back. I want to have one stud, maybe a veteran, maybe a young guy that's like a Michael Carter type guy, for this year's sake, and then I'm done at running back, other than some like dart throws at the end. I'd rather build around the positions that last a long time in the league. And, to me, if you're going to stream one of the 4 positions, running back's pretty easy to stream as you go throughout the season.
Really? Because I feel like running back is one of the harder ones to find, especially if you're talking Dynasty League, right? You can get some of those Phillip Lindsay, James Robinson situations, but for the most part, you're hoping on those injuries, which do happen. But even then, we see those fill-ins don't always quite replicate what that starter did. I think one of the good names you could bring up is Mike Davis, as a guy that was a waiver wire guy in Dynasty Leagues preseason. Then he wins the job over Bonifin behind CMC. And so that was just a success story. But a lot of times you don't quite see that success. So running back is a position that I would personally, that's the one that I hit pretty quickly. And I'm back on the clock. So let's see.
Stream was probably the wrong word. Normally we have a 30-man roster. I mean, we're only going 12 deep in this one. I mean, I will load up with those backup running backs in the rounds past 12. And injuries are going to happen. I mean, there's a lot of running back twos that are going to put in some serious work this year and put up some numbers, and we just don't know who they are yet. So collect those on the back end after you've built the core of your roster. Get 6 of those guys, and I bet 1 or 2 of them are going to start a couple games. So
I like what Chad has done with his quarterbacks, with taking somebody young like Fields, but then also pairing them with guys you're at least gonna, Stafford, a longer term starter, Cousins, maybe a little more questionable. But I like that sort of strategy there with getting a young stud, or what we're expecting to be a young stud with Fields. Stafford, you're going to get production out of him for at least the next 2 to 3 years, I would assume. And then Cousins can be that QB2 for him if Nagy decides to Nagy and not put Fields on the give him the starting job week 1. So I do like that kind of strategy if you're going to take somebody like Fields at 3-2 where he got him.
Brandon, add Matt Nagy to your list of coaches we want out.
Oh yeah. He's definitely one. I don't even know why you say there's no chance that Fields can start game one. I don't know why you have to say that, but yeah, he's probably done maybe mid-year if they flounder at the beginning.
Brandon, looking at your team, you've gone wide receiver heavy the last 4 rounds here, 5 of the last 6. I obviously love your wide receivers. That's quite the class. I'm curious what you're going to do here with only one running back, Eckler, and still looking for a tight end, which you can obviously wait on as well, and then maybe a QB3. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can go. But, man, having CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk, T. Higgins, I mean, those 3 are 3 of your top 4 2020 wide receivers from last year. Jalen Waddle and Rashad Bateman should be in that same discussion here for 2021. That is a youthful wide receiver room that I like.
Yeah, it's pretty on brand for me. Getting 2 quarterbacks, in the first couple rounds, and then loading up on wide receiver. I usually always wait on running back. It can be a hassle come season, but I usually just, kind of like Christian said, just load up on young running backs or the passing back of an offense and just have all those wide receivers that I hope will pick up the slack for that lack of production at running back.
My man. For the record, my past 2 wide receiver picks were auto pick because I was talking so much. So wouldn't have went Chark and Thielen there, but that's what we're working with the 30-second clock and me talking too much.
What do you guys make of Chark? Because he's the guy that I was starting to get. I was never a Chark guy, and then obviously he popped. He had his year with Foles and then Minshew, and then I kind of got lukewarm again. But I was starting to get excited about him. But then Urban Meyer comes out and they're talking about how to get Chenault more involved and how they want to bring him into the fold a lot more. And I kind of got a little bit of nerves going on with Chark. Is that just me, or do you guys have any thoughts that they might change wide receiver 1 there in Jacksonville?
I don't know if you guys heard one of the beat writers for, or it might have been a radio show in Jacksonville. They talked to Keenan McCardell, who was the wide receiver coach last year, and they said that Marone didn't let him coach the wide receivers. Pretty much wouldn't let him do what he wanted. And the offseason, Chark said, Urban kind of called him out for, not being physical enough. So I think Laviska and Chark, I think Chark's going to have a great year, but I don't know if he'll get re-signed in Jacksonville. If Laviska plays very well, they might let him go. And, since they have Marvin Jones and Colin Johnson and some of those other players, Chark might only be in Jacksonville for 1 more year.
Yeah, I think Chark is absolutely their wide receiver 1. Remember earlier in the offseason, there was this faux trade of him going to Baltimore for the offensive lineman. And then the Jags owner came out and said, that's absolutely wrong. It's a lie. It's a rumor. So obviously they want him. I really think that Sunshine increases his value a lot. And I think he's definitely wide receiver 1 material, I think, this year. And I know that people are high on Viska, and as should be, but I don't know if he's going to be as involved in the offense, especially with that kind of offense that Urban Meyer's going to run. Because you got Etienne doing the Percy Harvin role,
Right. I'm a little upset that Dwight is auto draft because we hadn't seen a tight end go off since Dallas Goedert at 7'3", and I was sitting here licking my chops for Mike Gesicki because he had just fallen so far. And then that auto draft just gets us. So
back to what you asked me, Robbie, about the lack of running backs and the double tap and the tight end.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would you honestly prioritize the position over the player and have drafted David Montgomery or Josh Jacobs or Miles Sanders over Darren Waller? Like, to me, having Darren Waller in my starting lineup is better than having any of those guys that just have the RB next to their name. So I'll gladly start 2 tight ends if that second tight end is Darren Waller, and my options were those third-year running backs. So,
yeah, I'm a fan of Montgomery, but that's going to be close for me. I do like Montgomery quite a bit. But, yeah, both of those guys, I would have been fine with either one. And I don't blame you because you got to take talent where you have it. You don't always reach for a position. Let me try and make this other pick here. But I'm interested to how the rest of the running back room stacks up for you there. God,
I don't know that I'll even take another running back with it only being 12 rounds. Like I said, I would mainly collect RB2s past that point up till about round 20. And then, like I said, the one running back position I have to start outside of Zeke will be a little bit of a weakness, but I'll make up for there with quarterback or tight end and not hope for an injury. But at some point, if I've got 6 RB2s, one of those guys is going to get a couple starts.
So normally around this time, I'd I'm looking at tight end just because I need another one. And I'm looking at Evan Ingram, Blake Jarwin, and Robert Tonyan. I have given Evan Ingram the last 2 years and saying this is going to be the last year I draft this dude. And this is finally the year.
Ooh, Blake Jarwin. That's interesting because, with him, obviously the injury kind of derailed that season. I was excited for him as a Cowboy fan and seeing what he could have done. We saw Dalton Schultz do a percentage of that in that offense, but I'm interested in that pick maybe over some of these other guys. They're all really close, but Blake Jarwin, I feel like might just split more time with Dalton Schultz after what we saw, especially because he's coming into I think it's the last year of his contract, and I'm curious if the Cowboys extend him there.
Yeah, and I just couldn't take any of my Patriots guys because you never know who's going to pop week to week, between Hunter Henry and Jonnu. So it's tough there for me. Also, not a huge Logan Thomas fan. And Higbee probably I should have went there just because of the Stafford now. But I just think Jarwin, with all the hype that he had, the game plan that he was for the Cowboys, and then obviously the injuries to both, I think he pops this year.
So, Christian, going back, I'm sorry, I'm a terrible multitasker. And when I was on the clock, I couldn't talk to you and try and figure out who I wanted. I ended up with Mostert, which is not ideal, seeing as I now have.
Same thing happened with me with Adam Thielen, so
yeah.
I'm in there.
so curious if we did extend this past 12 rounds. I mean, we're looking at Connor, Drake, Gainwell, Singletary, David Johnson, Chuba, Madison, Lindsey, McKissick, Henderson. I mean, I'm curious because you're going to have to start one of these guys, right? If we're starting two running backs. Connor obviously could be that guy for you this year.
Yeah, at this point, Robbie, I know where you're kind of going with this. This is where I would, if I had more than 30 seconds, I would kind of evaluate the board, see where I think my team is in terms of being a contender. If I really feel I'm a top 3 team here, I'm probably going to go James Conner because of that group. He probably has the most work coming his way. If I don't feel like I'm a contender, I'll probably lean Devin Singletary because he's got the youth on his side. He has like a 50% role with Zach Moss. Yep. Neither of those guys has taken the horns on that, so there's still a possibility he can get a larger workload than most of these guys here. So it would be either Connor or Singletary, depending on how I felt about my team. I'm not a huge Connor guy. The youth of Singletary, I still may go him anyway, just because it is a true 50-50 deal kind of there in Buffalo, in my opinion. I don't think either of them really took off over the other. So for me, I'll probably go one of those two guys in this round. But in general, like the Chuba Hubbards, the Darrell Hendersons, those premier backups to where if Christian McCaffrey or Cam Akers were to go down, I've got some good points coming from those guys. So I'll collect like 6 of those dudes, leading up until round 20, and if I've got the positional advantage like I do with quarterback and tight end, and I've picked up some good youth that I like at wide receiver, your early second-round rookie picks kind of guys like Terrace Marshall, I'm completely fine having that one rotating running back position because of how good I feel about my advantages elsewhere.
You got 12 seconds, buddy. End this well.
There we go. There's James Conner.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to put somebody in your IR spot, right?
Well, hey, I'm all for it. I am a trade for injured players guy, man. I will load that thing up. People's value drops when they're injured. I mean, look at Dak last year. There was one league where I actually saw Dak traded for Carson Wentz because the guy was contending. You needed a quarterback. Imagine you're the guy that gave up Wentz there for Dak. You're thrilled now. The guy that made the other deal better have won the championship, or he's pretty upset about it. But those deals can happen in season when everyone thinks they're contending. So it's important to have those bullets in your hopper.
So as we go to and wrap the draft itself up, let's just take a second, kind of go through our teams and kind of just how our gut feel on it. Obviously, the 30-second clock really puts a wrench into things. But Brandon, is on your team, is there anything, how did you like how your build ended up? Is there anything that you would change, just over these 12 rounds? Like, is there anything that sticks out to you that was like a sticking point for you? Or are you kind of just happy with the way everything shook out?
What I will say is the 30 seconds kind of sped up my process on the first and second round quarterbacks. Looking back, I kind of wish I either took Trevor or Fields on one of those two quarterbacks, but I still like that. And I was going to take Fant in the sixth round. And kind of looking back, I kind of wish I had done that. But I do like all the receivers I have. And kind of on with what I was talking about running backs, I picked a couple running backs that are, good in PPR, and Madison, kind of what Christian's talking about, the premier, back. And Dalvin Cook always misses some games, so he could be, a great top 12 starter if Cook misses any games.
For me, obviously wish I would have went quarterback earlier, but this is kind of what happens when you don't. I know Christian kind of touched on this already with wanting to get these guys early and not wanting to go, Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard, and first of all, hope that you get them off of waivers, and then having to plug them into your starting lineup is another gross feeling if you do get them off of waivers. So I think if I were to redo this, probably grab Stafford in the fourth and then hope that Tanny still came in the fifth is probably the way that I would go. But other than that, this is kind of how I do tend to build my teams. Just go, try to get kind of the same way in redraft too as well, with getting the stud anchor RBs that I feel good about just plugging in and just not having to worry about basically, week in and week out outside of bye weeks and injuries that pop up, and then just slamming wide receiver, like being able to get guys like Jerry Jeudy, who did he have a great rookie year? No, but he still put up, I think, over 800 yards, had a bunch of drops, but I mean, I'm not someone that's going to worry about drops unless your name is Deontay Johnson. We're already seeing the training camp videos coming out of him dropping balls, but getting young upside guys like that, and then taking guys like Elijah Moore and Jalen Reagor. And then, I thought Jared Goff was kind of interesting in the 12th, as far as a third QB goes, with some of the names that have come off, like Derek Carr, Jordan Love coming off the board as well. So I thought Goff was maybe potentially value in the 12th, but that would be the main thing, and just maybe taking at least one of my quarterbacks, a round or two earlier.
Yeah. Ashton, thank you for jumping in. Appreciate you helping us out. And then Walito, he says nobody touches his wide receivers. And he's right. He obviously has quite the stack there with Devontae Adams, Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin, and then Allen Robinson, finishing out with Deontay Johnson and Michael Pittman. But I think the flip side of that is where you see maybe the weakness of this team is that he has Kyler Murray, and then his next quarterback is Jordan Love, who is currently, as we see it in training camp, he is the starting quarterback there in camp, but we'll see what works out there. And then his running backs are Carson, A.J. Dillon, and Tony Pollard. So, Walito, you will be trading a wide receiver for a running back at some point, for sure. CJ, how do you feel like your team went?
I'm very happy with my depth, and most of my picks, I took a risk with Cam Akers, usually in a Superflex. Obviously, like Christian said, I'm going quarterback early. Thought Justin Fields would come back around. Obviously, Chad sniped him. So Baker's my consolation prize for that. Like I said, I'm still very high on Michael Thomas. I know a lot of people aren't. Zach Wilson also, a risk, but he's got some weapons, and hopefully he will produce. Normally in my dynasty drafts, though, I go youth a lot. And this time I kind of mixed in some veterans. Mike Evans, just, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns every year. As you had mentioned, Robbie, Jarvis Landry, same thing. He's good for 100 catches, close to 1,000 yards every single year. I really think if New Orleans is smart and they want to compete in that NFC South, that Jameis Winston has to be that quarterback. You cannot start Taysom Hill in New Orleans. But, my last two, 11th and 12th round, Blake Jarwin, obviously I'm just putting him in when Goddard's on a bye week. And Kadarius Toney, I don't think Kenny G will be there forever. Not sure exactly what Daniel Jones will be. He's kind of on the cusp of the hot seat. So we'll see. But, I'm happy with my rank, my team.
Yeah, I think if we don't have the two auto drafters, the quarterbacks go a little bit earlier, and I think it pushes running back down a little bit. Look, Cody, like you mentioned, I took Sermon probably earlier than most would. And I'm looking at Jay Stern's team. He got Miles Sanders at the 6'5". If Miles Sanders or Chris Carson fall to me there, I like that a little bit better, at least immediately. And I really like his team overall. He's got Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. So I think there's a ton of upside there at his quarterbacks. He's got Najee and Miles Sanders. And some people are a little bit cooling on Miles Sanders, but I still think that's a good 1-2 punch. Gus Edwards and Devin Singletary kind of round out a good running back room. And then his wide receivers, where you think he takes the hit, he has A.J. Brown at the top. Some people could argue that's wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. And then Cortland Sutton, Juju, Debo, and Curtis Samuel. So I really like how his team rounded out. He can find a tight end. He can grab a couple late. Cole Kmet was a guy that I was still looking at if we had gone later. Actually, I think he went – no, he might. Yep, he went right there in the 11th, at the end of the 11th to Brandon. But there's a couple of tight ends out there that he can throw on his team. So that's a team I just wanted to shout out. Christian, we heard a little bit about your team. Anything you do differently other than Thielen?
Yeah, I wouldn't talk too much during the Thielen area there, and I would have filled out my wide receiver room a little bit better. But as CJ was going through his team, I was kind of thinking about what we were just talking about last time I was rambling. And I see that CJ has Mike Davis as his RB3. And I've got a guy like Terrace Marshall down in the 10th round. So are you telling me that if CJ is out of contention midseason, that I couldn't flip a Terrace Marshall for Mike Davis, who really has no value past one season? So, like, it's not like I can't repair the RB2 position in season. You know, I chose to take Tua over Chris Carson because of how much better of a dynasty asset Tua is than Chris Carson. If during the season I absolutely needed to acquire a Chris Carson, I have Tua, I have Derek Carr, I have a guy like Terrace Marshall that's, not in my starting wide receiver group. You know, I have the ability to pivot and go choose a running back that's performing well and that's at a price where I like during the season. So that's why I encourage everybody, especially in Dynasty, to look to be active, because these are all assets that you can reposition at any time. Don't feel that the roster you leave the startup with is your roster the entire season. These are all assets, and they move like a stock market, and you can reposition them as much as you want to have the lineup that you need when you're going into the postseason.
You better think again. Walito says you are absolutely not getting Carson, so you'll have to find someone else.
I'll go get Mike Davis from CJ.
You know, that is interesting, because I think the reason that you said you kind of avoided some of the running backs was because of that injury, that risk, right, with them. And that's, again, just kind of going around and having this running back discussion. I feel on the flip side, if anything were to happen to Zeke, you're almost looking to the future, right? You're selling Zeke probably. You're getting a younger running back. You're probably looking to almost rebuild with the quote-unquote lack of depth. You might even be moving one of those tight ends to try and fix that. So absolutely there's the strength of certain sides, but I'll view it from the other side of the coin, where running back's a position I don't want to be short at because of the potential injury. And I think you can get wide receivers throughout the draft.
So I agree on the wide receivers throughout the draft part for sure. Go ahead, Cody.
No, I was just going to say, I was hoping I was going to be able to pull up the player list so the folks at home could also see who is left, but it doesn't seem like I can do that on desktop for whatever reason. So just, Brandon, I'll throw it back to you. Just rattle off a couple of like the guys who you would be, kind of looking at next, or, maybe even as far as like your team, what position, just any thoughts you have to start to wrap this up, guys you'd be looking for, and maybe like kind of just like what your later round strategy is for Dynasty startups.
Right. This was a little different for me because usually I like to have 3 quarterbacks by the spot. But since I kind of waited on running back and tight end, I felt like I needed to get that more. So quarterback, I don't think Cam Newton has went. So he would be a quarterback I would look for, or, another one, maybe even later getting a Gardner Minshew, because I think eventually a team might trade for him and he might be a starter for a year or two. So that, and then obviously pick up another backup tight end. And as Christian said, just kind of load up on backup running backs, since some of my running backs aren't great. I just have Eckler as my main one.
Yeah, and again, Robbie, if Zeke went down, I could trade Terrace Marshall for Tony Pollard, no problem. Like the value is the value. I could flip the value into a different position at any time. So I want the guys that are more valuable over the guys that are less valuable that have a different position listed next to their name.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of going off of what Brandon said, what I'm looking for in some of these rounds, and I did that in the 12th round, is I'm loading up on quarterback because it's a super flex. I grabbed Drew Lock at the end because a lot of people have the book written on Drew Lock is that he just isn't going to cut it and he's going to be replaced next year. I'm not quite there yet. I think there is a chance that he has success with all the weapons around him. Really, he's only had, I think, 16 starts. Just basically a full season if you add the 13 games last year and 5 games from his rookie. So mathematically, that would be 18. I was told there'd be no math. But yeah, he's a guy that I think there's a chance he can get some good starts out of a quarterback position. And then, like Brandon was saying, we have Cam Newton. We have Kellen Mond is another guy that I'm excited about if Kirk Cousins ends up moving on. So there's a lot of quarterbacks that I'm going to start hitting the draft button on because some of these running backs I'm not excited about, and I've loaded up decently up at running back where I have 4 that I'm comfortable with, and so that's where I'm going to look to. And like Christian said, this is where you start trading. Is if you load up on 4, 5, or 6 quarterbacks that you feel like have value here, 2021 going into 2022, you can flip that for a lot of talent because there's nothing that gets value quicker than a quarterback that gets a starting gig the next year.
CJ, are there any names that are still left on the board that tickle your fancy?
Kenny Gainwell for sure. I think he's going to have a big part of that offense, especially as a security blanket a bit for Jalen Hurts. Another guy that I think a lot of people are low on who I think could potentially pop this year is Henry Ruggs for the Raiders. I think they tried to force it to him early, and I think that whole offense was just kind of a mess. They even went away from Josh Jacobs, at the end of the year. Now you bring in Kenyon Drake, should solidify that run game a lot more, and I think that should open up the passing game for them.
I mean, to Christian's point about running back, obviously, you guys saw we cut it off after the 12th round. But I mean, you still have guys like Gainwell sitting there, Phillip Lindsay. I mean, not an offense you necessarily want to invest in, but someone who's obviously the youngest of the bunch, and he probably has the most staying power out of anybody else. Jamal Williams still sitting out there, Latavius Murray, and then if you want to take guys, obviously much later in the draft. But Elijah Mitchell for San Fran, I think he could have the pass catching role. Kylan Hill is your last round kind of guy. Larry Roundtree, somebody who could be splitting the touches with Eckler. So there are definitely still ways you could patch together that running back group room. With some of the names that are still sitting out there, and wide receivers, it's just bonkers. There are names sitting out here. I'm like, oh, should I have drafted him instead of one of the other guys? CJ, you brought up Ruggs. I mean, R.I.P. Denzel Mims. Apparently, he's never going to be a thing now. But then, obviously, still some of the the rookie wide receivers and second year guys. We just talked about Ruggs, Brian Edwards, obviously out there. I mean, if you want to go super late and get a veteran for a 1-year rental, Antonio Brown. I mean, I have to assume if they brought him back on a 1-year deal, he's going to be involved in that offense. So that would be the other thing too, is just because it's dynasty. If you feel that your team is in a spot to make a run, year one, I don't mind taking guys like AB later in drafts, or some of those guys who you're probably not going to be able to flip for anything, but could at least help, on bye weeks and that sort of thing. Russell Gage still sitting out there with the targets that are available in Atlanta as well. So a lot of interesting names. I was hoping to get Kmet whenever he came back to me the 12th, but Brandon sniped him there at the turn. I felt like he was, for dynasty purposes, absolutely the most intriguing name that was still sitting out there and available on the board. If you're looking at a guy who could take that next step, and then now having Justin Fields in the fold, I think Kmet is a sneaky sleep. I guess maybe not even sneaky at this point, but I do like him for redraft purposes and then dynasty as well. If you can go out and make an offer on him and try and get him on the cheap before the season starts, I like that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys, tight end. So Seattle, Gerald Everett is getting a lot of great news out of training camp. expecting a lot of big things from him. Obviously, I know they still have Will Disley, but what are you guys thinking about for Gerald Everett this year? Because he was really always the Rams' like number 2 or the guy who was supposed to be involved and never was.
I've been an Everett guy over a Higbee guy all these years and have been very frustrated that it's never come to fruition. So I'm holding out a little bit of optimism. What's that, Cody? Tyler Higbee's already lost his job to a rookie apparently.
That ugly bug beside you. I'm trying to swish him off the screen.
Ah, okay, gotcha. I thought you were shooing me for liking Everett over Higbee, and you were like, "Oh, I'm a Higbee guy," you know. But yeah, I'm holding out hope for Everett in Seattle. I think it's a good fit for him. I think he's a tremendous athlete, and for whatever reason, it just never came together in LA.
Yeah, I think he's a tight end that I want if I waited. So I got Komet in the 11th round, and if it come back around and Everett was still there, I would want to go after him because I think in that offense they've been kind of looking for that athletic tight end. It just hasn't been working out with all the injuries. So I think he could have a big year.
Could you imagine shooting for Cole Kmet or Gerald Everett as your tight end 1? I would never.
No. With your 2 tight ends, I feel like you'll never have to look at tight end for the rest of your dynasty career. Oh, wait, you'll probably trade them by Monday. So you might need them.
I'll trade Darren Waller to you since you got regret letting him go at the turn.
What up, Kev? Give us some
Hey, hold on 1 second. Hold on. I'm getting hammered by Robbie for not having an RB2, and this guy took Trey Sermon in the 6th round. So at least I'm not making those kind of reaches to have an RB2.
I don't get what's wrong with Trey Sermon. I feel like he's just a click below the top 3 guys. I mean, he's going to have the job by 2022, right? Like, do we foresee that he's not the guy Mostert's sticking around? Or
I mean, I have no problem with him.
Like all those other 49ers running backs.
Well, yeah, what about the other 5 running backs in those?
Yeah, we've never seen a Niners back actually be a bell cow. I just think you took him 2.5 rounds early. I mean, Michael Carter's pretty similar to him, and he went 2 rounds later.
Yeah, no, I could have gone either Michael Carter or Trey Sermon because what have we seen from all of these running backs? Obviously, the 2020 class is a little bit different, so I can't always use this excuse, but a lot of them, they take 5, 6, 7 weeks, and then they absolutely go ballistic. And what have we seen from our running back rooms in Dynasty? Our top 15 guys are littered with 2020 guys that took off halfway through the year. And we thought that running back room was crowded, right? We thought the Colts running back room was crowded. We thought the Washington football team's running back room was crowded. The Rams running back room was crowded. And all we see are all those guys in our top 14, 15 running backs now. I don't see any difference with Trey Sermon. I definitely think he's going to be the guy towards the end of the year and next year.
I feel like I took Chase Claypool a half round later than you took Trey Sermon. I think if I offered you Trey Sermon in an existing Dynasty League for Chase Claypool, you would not take it.
If you offered me Trey Sermon for Chase Claypool.
Yeah, in an already existing Dynasty League, not a startup. If I was to send you Trey Sermon for Chase Claypool, I do not think you would accept.
I think it's definitely roster dependent because I do like Chase Claypool as well, as you know. That's definitely a guy that I won't mind acquiring. But yeah, that's close for me, man. That's absolutely close. I think they're both worth a late first in rookie picks. So I think that's very close.
Yeah, but who's going to be their quarterback next year? Dwayne Haskins?
Allen Robinson's never had a good quarterback. Ever.
No, I'm talking about the Steelers.
I know. That's what I'm talking about. Like, I don't think it matters. I mean, we're talking about Trey Sermon. I mean, he's sharing the backfield with 4 guys at least as long as the current coaching staff is there. We've seen Chase Claypool score, 4 touchdowns in one game last year?
I feel like because there's names, we act like the backfield is going to have 4 guys. Like they're going to have 3 guys active on game day. So I think we need to kind of calm down. There were so many injuries that sure we saw JaMychal Hasty, but if we didn't see injuries, we wouldn't even know the name past. Oh, this is a guy I took late that was an undrafted free agent from Baylor. Other than that, we wouldn't know anything about JaMychal Hasty. Jeff Wilson, he gets the time because there's so many injuries in front of him. Wayne Gallman,
Elijah Mitchell stands in this room right now.
There absolutely can be, and I think he can be the pass catching back. That's the one I'll admit, honestly. But everybody else, I feel like we see a bunch of names and we're like we would have said, oh, but Marlon Mack is there and Jordan Wilkins is there, and then there's that Nyheim Hines guy, and Jonathan Taylor just went out and produced. And I'm comparing it to a second round running back who obviously I believe is more talented and everyone else probably does as well. But I just think we're going to look at this next year and we're going to be like, why were we worried about Wayne Gallman? Why are we worried about Raheem Mostert? Raheem Mostert got replaced halfway through the year. It's never been a guy that's been a running back one for an extended period of time. I mean, he was a journeyman until age 27. So I get the worry when we look at it right now. But again, this is Dynasty. We're going to be moving past this here at 2021. And how does it look next year, 2023, 2024? And so that's where I think Sermon is probably a reach, because I do like him more than other people. But I'm going to take the guys where I believe they should go.
Yeah. So here's another layer to that too. Like on you and Tom's debate the other day, it was Claypool versus Ayuk, right? You like Claypool more than Brandon Ayuk, right? So here's why you should send a lot of trade offers. If you have Trey Sermon, you can get Brandon Ayuk from Robbie for Trey Sermon. How do you know that if you don't send offers and have conversations with your league mates? So again, like, to me, that's insane. Like I would almost add a first to Trey Sermon for Brandon Ayuk, and I can get him straight up from Robbie. And I wouldn't find that out if I wasn't an active trader.
Hey, Elijah
Absolutely.
Mitchell is running a 4.32 40. You think that Shanny's going to keep him on the bench?
No, that is some speed, and I think the pass catching work will definitely get him on the field.
It doesn't worry you that a 49er running back under Mike Shanahan under Kyle Shanahan I don't think one has eclipsed 170 carries in a season since 2017 with Carlos Hyde. Like, that's just been their MO. Like, they're not going to sit here and feed one running back. They're not going to have that, right? And so I don't think it's crazy to think that this thing is going to continue. And to be honest, we don't even know if Trey Sermon's any good. Like, I mean, he bounced around, went from Oklahoma, went to Ohio State, didn't really do a whole lot until the end of the year. Like, it is well within the range of possibility that Elijah Mitchell is actually the better running back of the two, one that played at a smaller school. And so I would be completely out, whether I don't give a shit what the format is on Trey Sermon, because there's just way too many unquestionables there for him. He's not going to be a lead back. He's not going to be a guy that's going to get even 60 to 70% of the touches or 65% of the touches. He's not a good pass catching running back. So, I mean, say what you will. Yeah, I know you like Trey Sermon, but I feel like it's to me, a lot of this is with these running backs. Like, once you get past really the top three, it's like you're trying to search for, because it's well within the range possibility. Like, Michael Carter could not be anything, but we're trying to search for names because of like how good last year's was, right? And so we're trying to make these guys into something that they're probably not, right? These guys don't hold a candle to last year's class at all, right? Any of these guys really, maybe Najee Harris or Javonte could be in the conversation, but regardless of that Trey Sermon just isn't it. He's not that guy.
I will say this, just as far as those running back carries go, they also might not have had a healthy running back since Carlos Hyde did that with those carries.
That was my first question, is how many running backs have played 16 games for Kyle Shanahan since that time? And I honestly don't know the answer, but I can't imagine it's any. I mean, there's obviously that chance with any rookie that they fall flat and they're not the guy that you expected. I heard people telling me that I was taking Trey Sermon too high before the draft. They said, oh, he's going to be – Kev, I think you had him outside running back 8, or you had him running back 9 or 10 pre-draft. I've heard all the stories about Trey Sermon, but we have a 49ers team who traded up to get him in the third, after they already traded a lot of their assets to get Trey Lance. So this is obviously a guy that they coveted and a guy that they wanted to go get, and they traded up to get him. So to think he's not going to be used with Mostert on the way out. Mostert's not coming back next year. It's when you say he can't be the lead back, I mean, I don't know who you think the lead back's going to be in 2022. But
I didn't say he can't be the lead back. I said he's not going to be a back that is going to receive the volume of touches that you'd want. I think he probably falls somewhere and 10 to 13 carries. I think is what you're looking at. Very low volume pass upside with him.
10 to 13.
Yeah.
I mean, Mostert didn't even get that when he was healthy. He got more than that, I should say. He got more than 10 to 13. And that's another thing, is we can have the volume argument, but we've also seen Kyle Shanahan's running backs be uber efficient in this offense. And especially if we're talking about Trey Lance at the helm, we can only imagine those running lanes when you have a running quarterback. We've seen it happen with running quarterbacks with Lamar Jackson, with Jalen Hurts last year. The yards per carry is going to increase. Instead of looking at 4.2, 4.3, we're talking about up to 5 yards per carry. Absolutely. You can have that volume argument, but the efficiency, I think, counteracts that as well.
Well, yeah, I don't hate Trey Sermon anywhere near as much as Kev does, but I just think that like the value of like a Brandon Ayuk or Chase Claypool is much larger than where Sermon is now. So that's where I would say take another guy and then trade him for Sermon in a second. Collect assets. Dynasty's about collecting assets.
With that nugget from Christian, is there anything else you guys want to touch on as far as Dynasty startups go? Any other parting words here for the TFA fam?
Yeah, I do, but I'll let everybody else go. I feel like I've talked a little too much. If nobody else has anything, I'll throw some stuff in. But
yeah, I'm going to tell you something for Dynasty. I'm not a huge draft capital guy, but my big thing is, dude, just get your freaking guy. Who cares where you get him? If you're high on a dude, if you need him for your position, just get him. That's my advice.
Brandon, what you got?
I'll say this really hurt me last year. Be careful trying to trade up to get, premier guys, because there's one where I traded up and I got Mahomes and Lamar, but I gave up so much, so the rest of the team kind of floundered. So just be careful, trading up, because a lot of the, success in your dynasty team is the depth you get later, in the 7th or 8th round. So just be careful about those trades.
Yeah, my thing that I was touching on as far as startups go, I was talking about at the beginning. So if you're catching this halfway through or toward the end, it was just that take a look at how the other teams around you are drafting. CJ mentioned while we were in the middle of the draft, and normally he goes like super youth heavy. If you notice that you're drafting with, 6 or 7 other guys who approach it the same way that CJ does, that represents an opportunity for you to get some of the guys who are going to be falling. That might be, those 27, 28-year-olds who might be able to have you make a run year one. And if you can win that ship year one, and like you're kind of just, paying off the next 2 years and playing for free, essentially, that is definitely something you should be paying attention to. Jobbert.
Yeah, man, I think this was a really good exercise, even though it was quicker. Maybe we tone it down to a minute a pick next time, give us a little bit more time to think. But honestly, I think this is where you kind of see how you really feel about players and who you'd really pick one over the other. So I think that's a good strategy to kind of figure out how you rank and how you want players to be formalized on your team. So absolutely, I think we saw that the 2 quarterback start really helped some of these teams. But there's a lot of different ways to build teams. And like Christian said, I think the most important thing for dynasty leagues is make sure you're active, make sure you're seeking out trades, make sure you're listening and accepting trades, because that is how you can improve your team and your standing. If you're weak at a position, you can always flip your depth and improve at another position. So be active. That's the good part about dynasty.
Yeah, and then one of the biggest things for me is like with dynasty, make sure you're tiering your rankings before the startup, because Dynasty is all about collecting assets. And if you have 6 guys in one tier, maybe there's a chance for you to move back from the 4-2 to the 4-8, still get a guy you value evenly, and pick up a 2nd-round pick while doing it. If you could do that a couple times in the draft and you end up, stacking 5 2nd-round picks. I mean, look at the guys we were taking in the 2nd round this year: Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, Rashad Bateman, Terrace Marshall. You're telling me you wouldn't like to have those guys on your team next year? By making some of those small 5-6 spot moves back during the startup within the same tier, you're not losing current season value, and you're slowly picking up those assets. So all the dynasty leagues I play in, the owners that are not trading are not stacking assets, and they're not competing. They're usually out of the league in 3 years. The owners that are picking up a 2nd, picking up a 3rd when they can, and you look up at the end of the year and they've picked up 6 or 7 extra draft picks, those are the owners that are really building rosters that become dynasties. So keep that in mind, tier your rankings, and be willing to move back and to pick up a little extra capital.
How long would you guys say that let dynasty leagues last?
I've
just
never
on
been in
average,
one that's
on
folded,
average.
but I know some people have bad experiences
Well,
with
yeah,
them.
yeah, but just on average.
I'm in some right now that are north of 6 years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm in two that are 10 to 12 years. And then the majority of the leagues I play in are like in Scott Fish's safe leagues where they've never closed a league. So, I mean, if you're getting with a good commissioner service or with a good group of people, you know, you can be sure of it. But I see a lot of these like, you know, just random chats and people are, or even on Twitter. Oh, I'm doing a startup today on Sleeper. Who wants to join? You're going to lose 7 of those people. You know, I mean, if you're in with a good commissioner service or a good group of guys, you know, I've never been in one that folds, but I'm also very selective whose league I will join.
Right.
Same.
But I'm just curious. Like, what would you guys say if you guys are putting a number on it? How long would you say an average one lasts? There's a point to what I'm asking this for.
7 years, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I've never been in one that's closed, so I don't know.
Would you say it's probably like 2 or 3 years? Probably.
I think that's low. I think people that are really
Just for
in dynasty are in leagues for 10 plus
run-of-the-mill
years.
dynasty league.
I meant longer. I mean, I know
yeah,
I know the answer you're fishing for, and I'm just being honest. I don't think it's as low as you think.
I know I'm doing that because the question I'm asking is what I was going to ask you guys is for somebody that if you're jumping into a startup, like should you just focus on this 1 year and you're trying to win this year and not so much worried about because 3 years from now, you know, the league may not exist. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, no, that's a good strategy, and a lot of people do that. They do the win now. They'll trade their 2022 first, and they'll pile on to try and win because they know if they have a good team, they can do what Christian does and move some of those assets and just continue to stay at the top as long as the league goes. So there's definitely that strategy. I think that's something that I implore people to do because you see these older players, like I got Tom Brady later than a lot of people would, and people have been saying he's going to be done in 2 years for the past 6 or 7 years. So I think there's a lot of older talent that you can collect and be in the win now mode. So I'm absolutely an advocate of that. Whereas on the flip side, as we brought up in the chat earlier, Cody is drafting players only. What was it, Cody? 22 years and younger, 10 years and younger. One of those two.
Struggle.
Yeah. So he'll be the team.
That was a full punt. That was a definitely needed an asterisk beside that. But I would say that is one of the biggest pitfalls and something I actually did in my very first dynasty startup was I was just like so focused on youth because like I was in this mindset of like, all right, gonna have these guys for like 10 fucking years, man. It's gonna be awesome. I'm not gonna have to worry about anything. And then I literally think the following year I might have had like 4 of the original players I drafted on that team. But like you don't need to put a premium on youth. I literally remember I went home and I like added up the ages of all my players. It's like, dude, the average age on my roster is 23. Like I'm set for at least 8 years. Like don't focus. Like you don't want to go out and draft Larry Fitz in the 4th and like do anything crazy like that. But you also don't have to be so concerned with youth that you're taking, you know, rookies over guys who are in their like, let's say 3rd year and are going to be more productive this year and potentially for the next 2 or 3 just because of the age difference. So you definitely don't want to put like go like too youth crazy and, you know, have blinders on to guys like, you know, A-Rob and Devontae. And, you know, I think Julio went in like the 6th in this startup, I believe. So just, you know, taking those blinders off for sure.
And then you can take advantage of your league mates too. You know, if you know that you're not contending and they are, you know, after week 10 or something, they're going to be willing to give up a lot of those future assets to get an Aaron Rodgers or a veteran running back just for their playoff push. So take advantage of that too.
And then I just have one question for you guys. Since you guys have all played Dynasty for a really long time, right?
Yep.
So for someone who's just starting, right, and maybe it's their first year of ever playing Dynasty, right? What would be like one piece of advice you would give those people? Somebody that they've played redraft or whatever, they're dipping their toe in the Dynasty waters. What would be like, you know, if you could go back and tell yourself something whenever you first started playing Dynasty, what would it be?
I'll start off and I'll say it's something that I should have done preparing for this mock is I haven't done a startup for a full year now because I haven't added any leagues. I'm at my max right now. And you have to do these mock drafts. Like you absolutely have to, because like Christian's saying, I could have waited an entire round and probably still got Trey Sermon on the swing a full 23 picks later, or Michael Carter, who I view really closely to him. So if you know these values of where players are going in a consensus, something that's been done, 10 plus times in a month, and you know where these guys should be going, you can really hit on that value and figure out who's going to fall to you and where. So number one tip is be experienced, be prepped, do a lot of mock drafts before you have your startup.
One of the biggest things for me is a thing that veteran players don't really like, but if it's your first dynasty league, I think is crucial, is to find a trade calculator of some sort. Because the first time I joined a dynasty league online that was not with my friends back home, I'll all of a sudden, as soon as the league starts, I get like 4 offers, and it's all for startup picks. Like the 1-3 for the 3-7, the 6, and I'm like, oh my god, like how do I even evaluate this? I have no clue. So utilizing some of those tools allows you to, because when you're playing redraft, it's just the players. You've never evaluated a first round pick against a player. So using a tool to kind of, help you understand how those values are close is very important. Otherwise, you'll have a veteran dynasty player come in and just absolutely take advantage of you in the beginning, and then you're screwed. So relying on some of those tools in the beginning until you understand the dynasty values and how the draft picks and the future picks and all that stuff tie into everything. Don't be making moves without having that to help you out, because somebody will take advantage of you.
Yeah, I think for my advice, if I were to go back to my very first dynasty, would be, we were talking about tiers. Rank all your guys in tiers, because I've seen a lot of people where the draft will go one way, they'll go quarterback heavy or running back heavy, and then they'll start taking the best player available when they could just be taken out of their own buckets. So that's one thing I would definitely do. Don't just go by whatever, whether you're using Sleeper or Yahoo or MFL, don't go by what their ADP is. Go by what you feel is correct in your tier.
Brandon, what you got?
Mine is kind of going off what Christian said about the trade calculators. I know I don't use them to make a trade, but I kind of just use the trade calculators to see if I'm getting screwed or not. If it's somewhat close, then, I feel better. I guess it's just a reassurance thing. Another thing, early on, I was really into, just getting rookies, but I've seen that rookies don't hit nearly as much as you think they do. So don't trade away valuable veterans just to stockpile rookies, because, the hit rate isn't nearly as high as you really think.
The last thing I would say, again, don't overrate youth, but also don't make it out to be like a crazier thing than what it is. Like, I know some dynasty leagues can be super involved and contract and C2C leagues and all, they can be, but if you just join your I would say if you're hesitant about joining one, I would kind of join a pretty vanilla one, maybe a Superflex, maybe a tight end premium kind of thing. But they're really not, at the end of the day, a startup really isn't that much different than a redraft. If you're doing one of those, there's going to be some different swings on guys like Julio, who are going all the way in the 6th and the 7th. But outside of that, it's really not all that different. So if you're hesitant, maybe just start off with one that's, maybe just a regular PPR dynasty kind of league, and then go from there. But it's don't think that you have to have some super crazy strategy between redraft and dynasty. And then I'd also say to not look further than 2 to 3 years out. Like I said, when I first drafted mine, getting, it's oh man, I got this quarterback, I'm going to have him for 15 years. And these running backs are 22 years old. Don't worry about that. If you were active, maybe not to the level of Christian, but if you're active in your leagues, your team next year will probably look a lot different than it does in your startup. So don't make it be anything bigger than what it actually is. If you're comfortable with redraft, just jump into a vanilla kind of dynasty, get your feet wet a little bit, and then maybe add another league or two, the next year or so.
Is that all we got? We're gonna wrap this puppy up.
I went this entire time I've been here without saying one negative thing about Dynasty. See, look at me.
So
Except your name.
And I really wish Kev was here to draft, because I thought Kev was going to come out and go like Derrick Henry, Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, all like the 30-year-old guys. And honestly, Kev may have won the league in year one, and that's something I want to say there. Say you've been a redraft player forever, you're considering playing Dynasty, you're not sure if you'll stick with it for 10 years. Come in and you can play like redraft and probably win your league in year one, because a lot of guys in here are going to be drafting nothing but 21-year-olds, so you can get a quick victory if all you want to do is win in year one in Dynasty, but you're probably going to be rebuilding, a full gut job like 2 years later. On that, there is kind of a way around that, like a little more advanced strategy. And I actually made a trade like this kind of in Robbie's league a couple weeks ago. So I had 3 running backs that were all 25 or older, and I didn't want all 3 of my running backs to be that age. I wanted to gain a couple years back on one of them to where my team's not just dead here in a couple years. So I packaged a 2nd-round pick along with Zeke for DeAndre Swift. So I used a 2nd-round pick to buy back 4 years in age. So now I don't have 3 running backs over 25. I have 2, and I've got a 22-year-old that I know I'm going to get more years out of. And that just cost me a 2nd-round pick, which, again, I acquired tons of by making those small moves back. So there's ways to not have to completely rebuild, even if you're going for an early win. But if you really want to cement that championship year one and go for a rebuild, you can trade your draft picks, do whatever you need to, and get that win. But there's ways, in my opinion, to not have to play in a 2 to 3 year window, buy back those years slowly, and be able to stay competitive permanently in Dynasty if you're collecting assets and making small moves like that from time to time.
100%. The biggest piece of advice would be to hit that subscribe button, give us a like. That is the biggest piece of advice we can give you. You can always reach out to any of us and all of us on Twitter as well. You can always drop comments on the YouTube, on the TikTok, on the Instagram, wherever you are. We are there. We are here for you. Even with obviously redraft season is about to really start heating up. We got you guys covered there. We're also going to have the Dynasty, DFS, and Debbie content coming out for all of you. So big thank you to everyone who are the non-TFAers who jumped in with us. I'm sure we're going to do a couple more of these as the season goes on. And other than that, just like I said, hit that subscribe button. We'll talk to you all very soon.